All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Wagner. I'm a clinical dietitian specialist at the Abramson Cancer Center. And this afternoon, I'll be talking about nutrition and covering herbs and supplements in particular. They do just have the screen set up in the front two rooms, so if you're in the back and having trouble seeing or hearing me and want to kind of move up, I think that there are, at least for these two sessions, spaces closer to the front if you'd like to move up a little bit. And what I was planning to try to do is just talk really for about 20, maybe 30 minutes on a few different issues, and then really leave plenty of time for questions, because I know that probably a lot of people have a lot of specific questions about this topic, and since it is such a big topic, I won't be able to address things so specifically in the talk, but hopefully I can get a chance to do that in the question and answer session. As I mentioned, it is a huge topic. I was thinking to myself about this topic, nutrition, herbs, and supplements. It's kind of like asking a doctor just to talk about medicine. There's a lot of different medicines, there's a lot of different herbs, there's a lot of different usages for them and dosages and situations where they're used in. So unfortunately, in about 30-40 minutes, I can't cover it all, but I do have some things that I would like for you to get out of this talk today. I would really, at the end of this talk, I really do hope that you will have some resources for where to go for reliable information about herbs and supplements. I will leave up the slide that has the resource list on it for a while, and if you do, thank you. And if you're not able to write everything down, then I'll also give my email address, and you can email me, and I can send you the source list. I do hope that at the end of this talk, you will be able to and know to talk to your doctor about any vitamins, herbs, or supplements that you are taking. They are active in the body, and your doctor does need to and want to know what you're taking that can impact your treatment and just how you're doing overall. And I do hope that you'll be able to understand a little bit more about the science behind some very commonly used herb supplements and vitamins. All right, so I am going to start off with just a definition. Dietary herbs and supplements are defined by law in this country, by a law that was passed in 1994 called the Dietary Supplements Health and Education Act. It's often abbreviated DSHEA, is the more common term for this law. And this law actually does define what is allowed to be sold as a dietary herb and supplement. Any vitamin, any mineral is under this law, and also all the herbs and botanicals, amino acids, and then a very broad kind of catch-all category which involves concentrates, metabolites, constituents, extracts, or combinations of any of the four above parts, vitamins, minerals, herbs, or amino acids. Again, the DSHEA defines herbs and supplements as something that's intended to be taken as a capsule, a pill, or a powder. It's not supposed to replace a diet or a meal, but it's supposed to kind of be sold as a natural enhancer to a diet. I'm just going to cover these a little bit more in depth. So this actually does include all 13 identified essential vitamins are regulated and sold under the DSHEA Act, as well as minerals. There's at least 16 minerals that have been identified as essential for human health, and 3 to 4 more that have some evidence that they're essential for human health and are also marketed and regulated under the DSHEA Act. The first two categories are a little bit easier. The vitamins and minerals are well identified and we know what they are. When you start getting into herbs and amino acids, what's covered under dietary supplements and herbs, this is where it really explodes. There's no concrete count for how many herbs are used throughout the world in some way as far as in medicinal or in medical systems. Basically, what I could find was that people, I think, just kind of gave up and just quoted big numbers. About 10,000 was kind of the most common guess that I heard as far as identified herbs that are used in some way in some medical system throughout the world. And under the DSHEA Act, any of these 10,000 herbs can be sold as dietary supplements. Not all of them are. I will talk about the ones that are more commonly used, but as you can see, this obviously is where it gets to be a huge category of things that are covered under dietary supplements and herbs. Amino acids are also sold as dietary supplements. There's 22 standard amino acids that we know are essential in the human body. And of these 22 essential amino acids, a lot of them can be combined or are combined in the body to do other functions. And so some of those amino acid derivatives or combinations are also sold as dietary herbs and supplements. There's a product called L-carnitine, which isn't a particular amino acid, but it is a combination of 2 different amino acids that's important for fat oxidation, that is a pretty commonly used dietary supplement, but it doesn't fall under any of the standard amino acids, but it's a derivative of the amino acids. So the last category, this constituent, metabolite, extract, or combination, is also where this category just explodes. A lot of commonly used dietary herbs and supplements do fall under this constituent or metabolite category. Things like a DHEA, which is a steroid-like metabolite, was actually regulated as a drug prior to 1994. Once they passed the DHEA Act, people argued that you could actually eat DHEA if you were eating mostly glandular organs like pancreas and liver. So they argued that it should be covered under the Dietary Supplement Act because it is something that you could eat in food. So after 1994, DHEA has now been regulated, instead of as a drug, which it was before, it's now regulated as a dietary supplement. So some of the things in the law got a little bit circular, but for the most part, the constituents and metabolites cover things that aren't covered in other categories. Melatonin is a very commonly used dietary supplement that's under this constituent category. Glandular extracts, and also a lot of specific phytochemicals or plant chemicals that I'll talk more about later, because these are a lot of exciting, this is where a lot of the exciting research comes from. And they're not, these phytochemicals are not particular vitamins or minerals, but they're not found isolated in nature, but because scientists have discovered that in isolation they have specific effects in cell cultures or in our bodies, a lot of companies do extract them and isolate them and then put these into supplements. Things like resveratrol, which is a very, seems to be a very potent phytochemical found particularly in red wine. It's also in peanuts and walnuts, would be extract that's sold under this category. Also curcumin, which is the active, not the only active, but one of the more active ingredients, or one of the more active phytochemicals in turmeric, is sold under this category as well. Besides all the rest, probiotics, fiber, and other dietary supplements or dietary additives fall under this category. So again, it's excuse me, it is a huge category. It covers a lot of dietary herbs and supplements, covers very, very, very broad range of things that we can put into our body, basically. So also who uses these? That's another key factor, both for the doctors and for patients who are looking for information, and it's actually a big issue for our government as well, and the government does invest a lot of money into looking at who uses supplements, why they're using them, and how they interact with things. The estimate of the United States population is that 60 to 70% of the United States population uses dietary supplements and herbs in some form. Multivitamins are a big chunk of this. It's often thought that if you kind of leave out multivitamins and just ask people if they use dietary supplements and herbs that aren't multivitamins, you get about half this number. But when you add in multivitamins, this is why it's such a big industry. And cancer survivors and cancer patients also use dietary supplements and herbs a lot. Based on different surveys, up to 80% of people who are cancer survivors or who are going through treatment do use supplements and herbs in some form. Again, it's thought that multivitamins do account for a lot of this, but certainly we know that other dietary supplements and herbal extracts are being used as well. Breast cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer survivors tend to report the highest usage of dietary herbs and supplements. Obviously, with all these people using these things, it is big business in the United States. The last estimate that I could find was about $27 billion spent on dietary herbs and supplements in 2009. And it's increasing. Again, multivitamins account for a huge part of this number. But also herbal supplements particularly are increasing. In 2010, the last estimate was that $5.2 billion were spent, particularly just on herbal supplements, not vitamins, not minerals, not amino acids, just herbs themselves, $5.2 billion. To put this in a little perspective, though, the $27 billion is about 10% of the pharmaceutical sales in the United States. So even though $27 billion is a lot, it's still a small fraction of what's spent on drugs in this country. And also that $5.2 billion is what's estimated to be spent on just one drug in the United States in this country, and that's Lipitor, which is the highest selling medication in this country. So it's big business, but it's not as big a business as pharmaceuticals. These are the top 10. These are the top selling nutrition supplements in 2010. The multivitamins, the calcium, the B vitamin complexes, the C, E, D, and E, and omega-3s are all the top sellers. The ones on the left side of the screen, flaxseed, grass, particularly wheatgrass and barley, usually taken as a powder or a drink. Aloe, turmeric, stevia, cranberry, saw palmetto, soy, and garlic, and ginkgo are the top-selling herbs in the United States. So I do want to talk a little bit about the research behind some of these top-selling herbs and supplements just a little bit later. So besides being big business, there's a lot of exciting science that goes into dietary herbs and supplements. There was a paper that came out in January from Penn. It was a collaboration actually between Abramson Cancer Center and the Penn Archaeology Museum, and they were looking at cancer-fighting compounds in ancient herbal beverages. And what they were actually doing is examining the leavings from ceremonial vessels that had been left in graves, and they were trying to examine some of the compounds that were in these ancient beverages and seeing if they could, especially in test tubes and in petri dishes, seeing if any of those chemicals were particularly active against certain cancer lines. And it yielded some very exciting results, kind of just, I think it was a kind of a historical interest as well as trying to figure out if some of these older compounds, wormwood was in there, and certainly resveratrol showed up even 2,000, 3,000 years later after the beverages had been left in gravestones. So fun science, but also on the more serious side, a lot of research does go into the active compounds in some of these other herbs and vitamins. Grapeseed extract, alpha-lipoic acid, green tea, which with its active constituent EGCG, turmeric, with curcumin that I talked about a little bit. Omega-3, calcium, and vitamin D is a huge issue, research topic. Resveratrol, quercetin, CoQ10, and mushroom extracts all get a lot of press and a lot of funding dollars to find out about what's in them and how it interacts in the body and with cancer cells. These next two slides are really just kind of a visual picture of some of the plants that compounds are found in. Basically, when scientists look and break down different vegetables, herbs, fruits, they can find hundreds, if not thousands, of active chemicals in all of these fruits and vegetables and plants. Some of them are more active than others. At the top row is, on the next slide is the turmeric, which I'll talk about again. But the key thing that I want to address is that these phytochemicals do come from plant sources. Even once they're extracted and sold as pills and powders and forms, their original source was plants. And I will come back to that later, because the fact that plants are the source and plants are the natural venue, basically, to deliver these phytochemicals becomes important when we're making broad recommendations. These are a little bit less common, except the bottom row is pretty common, sources of active phytochemicals. The turmeric is on the second row, second from the left, and that's what it looks like, ginger underground, but it's bright yellow. People might recognize it from the spice drawer because it's the yellow powder. And I definitely want to touch base on the research about that later. So the plants do provide us with the natural form of phytochemicals. What this slide is a schematic of one particular protein, or a kind of family of proteins called NF-kappa B that's thought to be particularly active in cancer cells. It's also a protein that's particularly active in any cells that are actively dividing. And there's things that cause this protein to tell cells to turn on, and there's things that tell this protein to tell cells to turn off. So for NF-kappa B is also active when you're having wound healing, it's active in pregnancy, it's active in inflammation, and it's thought to be active in cancer cells. Obviously, there's times that you want your body to tell cells to make more cells. If you're trying to heal a wound, if you're pregnant, you want this protein to tell cells to turn on. However, if you're having an inflammatory condition, if you have cancer cells that you don't want to be turned on, you want this protein to be turned off. On the left side in the red, ovals are things that upregulate or tell this protein to be more active. Hormones, obesity, tobacco, other growth factors tell this protein to tell cells to make more cells. On the right side in the green bubbles are just the tip of the iceberg of phytochemicals that are known to influence this protein and tell this protein to tell cells to stop making more cells. The bottom line is that when you have cancer cells, you don't want them to make more cells. And the phytochemicals in green do interact with this protein and have it down-regulate cells. What seems to be coming out more and more from the research is that some of these are very active, but they seem to be even more active when they all not all of them work together at the same time, but even small doses of a lot of these chemicals taken over periods of time seem to be the most effective in down-regulating the NF-kappa B. All right. So with all this research, with getting the chemicals out of plants, with having them interact with proteins, what happens to all this research? A lot of drugs, a lot of medications are developed from plants. There's a chemotherapy. A lot of common chemotherapies, actually. Abraxane is one of the ones that was developed from the yew tree, and even more common medications such as aspirin were developed from plants. So a lot of the phytochemicals that come out of plants do eventually get developed into drugs in one way or another. However, we also know that some of the phytochemicals are not as active in our bodies as they might be in cell cultures or they may be in animal models. So a lot of research also goes into ways that the chemicals or phytochemicals that are in herbs may be able to be more bioavailable or more active in the body. And apart from just looking at the chemicals themselves, a lot of scientists are looking at ways that someone's particular genetics can influence the way that herbs and supplements interact with the body. For instance, the soy and breast cancer issue is very much an ongoing area of research. Briefly, this was an area where it seemed like soy was protective for breast cancer, and then everyone started adding soy to their diets, and then it looked like maybe soy wasn't so great when added in high doses to people's diets. And more recently, what has come out of this research is that soy does interact both with the tumor type of particular breast cancers, and it actually just may interact with someone's particular genetic makeup. We know that soy does seem to be more protective in Asian populations, and we're not sure if that's a genetic factor that causes the soy to be more active in the body, or whether it is a issue where over time people kind of adapt to the healthy phytochemicals in soy. The same issue is kind of going on with colon cancer and fiber. We know that colon cancer, generally there's a risk reduction of when you eat a lot of fiber, you generally have a reduced risk of colon cancer. However, this does seem to be more prominent in some populations and in some types of colon cancer. So these kind of nuanced differences are an active area of research. People are also looking at combinations. Soy and tomato is a particular combination that people are looking at with regards to prostate cancer particularly. Turmeric and dietary fat, whether dietary fat can help increase the ability of turmeric to work in the body, is certainly an area of research. So these are areas where things might work together to work better. And then there's also areas where people are really trying to tease out if certain herbs and supplements may interfere with treatment. EGCG is an active ingredient in green tea, and Velcade is a medication that's used a lot with multiple myeloma. It was thought at one time that these may help each other work better, and then in laboratory studies it seemed like high amounts of EGCG actually interfered with the medication of Velcade and didn't make it as active against the cancer cells. So this obviously concerns people with multiple myeloma who are taking Velcade because you'd like your medication to be active. And there's some concern as well with things like Abraxane, which since it's derived from a plant, will other plant chemicals interact with it? Definitely an area of ongoing research. We also know that St. John's wort and immunosuppressant medications do interfere with each other. So if people are taking immunosuppressants for a bone marrow transplant or lung transplant or kidney transplant and also taking St. John's wort, the St. John's wort can make those immunosuppressant medications less active. And that was unfortunately found out because people did have organ rejection when taking St. John's wort. So this is just to underscore that herbs are biologically active and they can have very good effects, and then they can have effects sometimes that we just don't expect. I do, again, just want to cover a quick word about regulation. Dietary supplements and herbs are not regulated the same as drugs in this country. DSHEA is the big law that really regulates how herbs and supplements are presented and are regulated in this country. They're regulated more like food. People don't have to provide safety or effectiveness data before they're released on the market. And products do not need to be registered with the FDA. The FDA does not maintain any sort of comprehensive list of all the herbs and supplements that are out there. Recently, actually last year, the FDA, well, in 2007, the FDA mandated that companies do need to use good manufacturing practices while making herbs and supplements, and that those were rolled out and just took effect in all companies for last year. So now all herbal supplement companies and vitamin companies in the United States do need to use good manufacturing practices when they make herbs and supplements. This still doesn't address the safety or effectiveness data, but it does mean that when people are making the herbs and supplements, they are following processes that are written down and should ensure that what's in the bottle is what they say is in the bottle, that they have a good, safe factory that they're making the supplements in. So it's a little bit more regulation, but still not up to the level of pharmaceutical regulation in this country. The FDA can also only recall products after they're on the market, and it doesn't happen very often. It did happen with ephedra, which was a supplement that was sold often for weight loss and did seem to cause more high blood pressure and strokes in people that were taking it. So after many years, the FDA was able to recall that product, but they don't recall very many, or they don't kind of stop and recall very many products. So after talking about what herbs and supplements are, who uses them, where the science comes from. The million-dollar question is always, should people take dietary herbs and supplements? And the short answer is, at this time, we do not recommend any herbal supplements across the board for everybody. And this goes for primary prevention. There's no particular supplement that can be prescribed for everybody that will 100% that may guarantee or may lower risk for cancer prevention. There's no herbal supplements or vitamins that are known to enhance all therapies, and there's no herbal dietary supplements, unfortunately, or vitamins or minerals that are known to reduce the risk for prevention for all kinds of cancers. And in a way, this kind of, and this is not just me, this is not just my opinion, it is kind of a shared opinion by the Society for Integrative Oncology, the American Cancer Society, the NIH, the National Center for Comprehensive and Alternative Medicine, and a lot of the major cancer centers. So I just want to talk a little bit about why that is. I've talked a little bit about how dietary supplements and herbs are absolutely biologically active, and their effects are complicated, and we just don't know all the interactions with other medications. So just as no doctor would probably stand up here and recommend a medicine for everybody across the board, no matter what, we're not able to stand up here and recommend a dietary supplement for everybody across the board, no matter what. And that actually does even go for multivitamins at this point. I'll come back to that later. So there's no, I guess, so that's kind of, I guess the bad news up front is that there's no special dietary supplement or herb that everyone should take in every situation. When people come into my office or when you go into a doctor's office, they should be evaluating what kind of herbs and supplements you're taking and not just making blanket statements. There is a system for evaluating whether or not an herb or supplement is helpful in a particular person or a particular situation. There is a lot of research on safety and effectiveness of dietary herbs and supplements and multivitamins and minerals. Doctors have access to this, dietitians have access to this, pharmacists have access to this. So if you go to see any of these specialties, people really should be looking carefully at what you're taking and not just saying, okay, take whatever you want, doesn't matter. Or on the other hand, people shouldn't necessarily be saying, oh, you should never take anything, it's all, there's no evidence for anything. The practitioner that you're seeing and taking your questions to should really be going through a process of evaluation. The best scenario is if you take something to a doctor and say, hey, I'm taking some ginger because I'm still having chemotherapy-related nausea during treatment, that the Zofran isn't really helping. There's data out there that shows that ginger should be safe to be taken during chemotherapy, and it may be effective for chemotherapy-related nausea. So ideally, a doctor would be able to access that information and say, okay, that sounds fine. You can continue taking your ginger. If you take something to a doctor and there's data that says that it's pretty safe for you to take, but we just don't know if it's effective or not, they should be looking at that too. If some things have been shown to be effective, but may not be safe in certain situations, there's a kava, which is certainly sometimes taken for relaxation and sleep, has been shown to be pretty effective for helping people with sleep, but unfortunately has been related to some liver problems and should definitely not be taken with people with any forms of hepatitis. So that's something a doctor would say, well, it may work, but it may not be the safest thing for you to take. And then there's certainly the category of things that we know are not safe and don't seem to be effective for certain situations either. So this is kind of the process that ideally you would want your practitioner, whether it's a pharmacist, dietitian, or a doctor or nurse practitioner, to be looking at and going through with you with particular medications. And they should be able to talk to you about it. It shouldn't just be like, the people shouldn't just be able to say yes or no. They should be able to talk with you about the science behind it. So I did just want to touch a little bit on some of the commonly used herbal supplements and minerals. I'm a little bit running behind on time, so I'm going to run through these very quickly just so I can also leave time for particular questions. So multivitamin, again, this is the biggest category. We do use them a lot, and they are recommended when people are losing weight, certainly around GI surgery and weight loss, and when people have had prolonged vomiting that can deplete a lot of vitamins very quickly. We do recommend multivitamins. But unfortunately, there's limited evidence they will actually help prevent cancer. There's limited evidence even with heart disease at this point. And this is something that people have been looking at, but we can't recommend them for prevention, but we do use them, and they are recommended in certain situations. Calcium is a thing that a lot of people take a lot. Obviously, there's the bone health issue, particularly with cancer and calcium. There's some evidence that it may reduce risk of recurrence for distal colon cancers. It has been associated with sometimes an increased risk of prostate cancers in some studies. So depending on your particular situation, it may be something that a doctor would recommend, but it may not be either. Certainly, after high-dose steroids, it is something that should be on everybody's kind of supplement list. Also with any GI, with most gastric surgeries, people should be taking them. Probiotics are what's found in yogurts and other fermented dairy products and other fermented products. The research up to date has shown that they may be helpful in reducing diarrhea with radiation, particularly after with a 5-FU or irinotecan, which are the particular chemotherapies that have been studied with probiotics. And they may help recovery with like a C. diff infection. They do have issues. We don't know what strains are the most effective, what dose people should take, and whether food or supplements would be the best form for them. Omega-3 supplements are certainly very common and have been shown to be pretty effective with high triglycerides. And especially with cancer research, the research is ongoing. They may help prevent lean muscle loss during treatment, but they are known to increase risk for bleeding and can particularly interact with warfarin or Coumadin. So if you are taking any of those medications and thinking about taking omega-3, there's something that you want to talk to your doctor about. I talked a little bit about ginger. The studies are usually done in 1-gram quantities, taken with a high-protein diet. And at this point, it seems to be a relatively safe intervention for chemotherapy-related nausea, but they're definitely still looking at interactions. Curcumin, again, is this active phytochemical that's in turmeric. It seems to be very, very active in cell cultures against cancer cells and in animal models. They've had some mixed results in human studies. MD Anderson has done a lot of curcumin research, as well as other centers throughout the United States. In human studies, it's been difficult to maintain high blood levels of curcumin, high enough that are usually shown to be effective in animal studies or cell cultures. So people are looking into ways to increase absorption and decrease bioavailability. Pepper and other fat may help increase absorption, and this is usually the way it's taken in a natural diet with curry and combined with food. So the kind of normal way it's usually taken may be the most effective. There has been some caution with high doses of curcumin and gallbladder disease. So if you have a biliary stent or have had a gallbladder taken out, you may just want to be more cautious with curcumin. It seems to need the gallbladder to be most effective. Green tea is something that also gets a lot of research. Generally, the research is very positive. Green tea, especially the brewed green tea leaves, usually taken in when they're doing studies, it's usually doses of about 3 to 5 cups a day. And it does seem to help prevent or slow the growth of certain cancers, most particularly gastric, breast, and prostate cancer. It has been reported to have liver effects with the extract, with the EGCG extract. So it's more of an issue where you're not so much or drinking too much green tea, but if you're using the EGCG extracts, there may be issues with liver function. And that's something a doctor could look for and assess on an ongoing basis. And also green tea does contain caffeine, and it contains vitamin K, so if you are on a diet where you're not supposed to have a lot of caffeine, you may need to look at the green tea, or you may need to do decaffeinated green tea. Or if you're taking, again, warfarin or Coumadin, green tea is still something to be very cautious with. So some particular issues that come up during treatment that have some nutritional, dietary, supplement, and herbal research behind them. The neuropathy, a lot of the peripheral neuropathy that comes up with some chemotherapies. There have been some studies with dietary herbs and supplements that may help with that. A lot of this actually gets transferred over from the diabetes research. Some of these, the B6, alpha-lipoic acid, and glutamine have been used with diabetic neuropathies, and people are really kind of trying to transfer this over to some of the peripheral neuropathies that are coming along with chemotherapy. Wound healing, especially after surgeries, these are kind of standard vitamins and mineral supplements that are typically used to help wound healing, especially in the hospitals. If you're having kind of long-term wound healing issues, you do want to, of course, talk to your doctor, but these are some of the supplements that may be helpful for helping wound healing. A, C, E, and selenium, and glutamine and arginine. Again, and you'd want to talk to your doctor about dosages and whether or not it's appropriate for you or not. I do just want to touch on some of the ones that people really should be very cautious with. Kava, I talked about before, is something that has been shown to be pretty effective for helping with sleep, but it does have it can be very toxic to the liver. So kava, valerian are two that have been associated with adverse effects. St. John's wort is something that just interacts with a lot of medication. St. John's wort is something that has been shown to be relatively effective for helping mild depression, and generally has a profile of side effects that compares favorably to other antidepressants, but it should be taken with caution because it does interact with so many medications. The omega-3s should be taken with caution if you're going to have any surgeries or if you're at risk for bleeding or have low platelets. Folic acid is definitely an area of a lot of research at the moment because it is so helpful with neural tube defects. It's been added to a lot of, it's been added actually to the grain system in this country. And it is helpful for reducing, we know that diets that are high in folic acid, diets that are high in folate can reduce the risk for cancers long term. But again, it's one of these supplements that seems like when it's added in high doses all at once may increase the risk for certain cancers, particularly colon cancer, which is why the timing of when you're taking supplements is very important. So I did just want to also give you some resources. This is not an endorsement of any of these companies, but these are generally reputable companies reviewed by a third-party laboratory called Consumer Labs. This third-party testing they've done multiple tests on multiple supplements made by these 4 companies, and for the most part they have been accurately labeled and they contain what they're supposed to contain. The GNC, Nature's Made, Puritan's Pride, and Jarrow are supplements that I generally feel comfortable recommending to my patients because they generally seem to have what they're supposed to have in them. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the United States Pharmacopoeia verification, which is the USP certification. Nature Made also participates in this verification, which is an additional certification elicited by some vitamin companies so that they have even more oversight of what they're doing. So the recommendations really that I want to leave you with is definitely talk to your doctor, go to reputable sources for information, and consider what you're trying to do with the herb and supplement. Just like you wouldn't take a medication without thinking about what you wanted to get out of it, don't just take a vitamin or herbal supplement just because your neighbor told you to, or your friend told you to, or someone in the chemotherapy waiting room told you to. Try to think about what you want out of the supplement and then talk to your doctor about it. I do always recommend food first. Vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals come from plants, and plants are a great way, eating more plants is a great way to get more vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals. The American Institute for Cancer Research does contain specific specific recommendations for cancer prevention. And their last one is not to use supplements to protect against cancer, but really to rely on food and whole foods and exercise as a first line of defense. And these are my kind of top 10 foods with lots of phytochemicals in them. So I do want to leave time for questions. I'm going to leave this slide up because these are references. So these are reputable sources for good information about dietary herbs and supplements. A lot of these I used in preparing for the talk, and a lot of these I use every day when talking to my patients. The Consumer Labs and Consumer Reports both are third-party kind of agencies that look at what's in dietary supplements. So those are particularly helpful. Mm-hmm. Which one? Okay, sure. I can do those. I'm sorry, what? I'll leave this up for about 5 minutes. I'll leave this up for just a few minutes, and then I'll go to the next one, and then I'll go to the next one. And we can hopefully get these up on the website as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm a survivor of prostate cancer, and I have been through a lot of different types of treatments. What I wanted to know really is I've been advised not to eat soy products after I have had cancer. Would you comment on that? Do you have any ideas that you feel about that?
You were told not to eat any soy food?
Soy products.
Soy products.
Soybeans or things like that. I mean, I guess there's soy in so many things, but I like soy products, okay. But I was advised not to. Is that true?
So as far as I know from the research of soy and prostate cancer, is it still does seem to be helpful for reducing the risk of prostate cancer and prostate cancer recurrence. I'm not sure if they're coming from a place that maybe the thought is that it's going to interact like breast cancer, but that I'm not sure of. In
different food stores, whole food stores, so it may not be accurate. That's
yeah. Yeah. Now, as far as I know, the relationship with the prostate cancer and soy is still thought to be really a protective effect, and that whole soy foods such as tofu, edamame, soy milk, or soybeans is typically the first thing that people should do, and not necessarily take supplements, but that whole soy food should be safe. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
The gentleman was asking about soy. I've done a lot of reading on that. And soy is one of the products that's a GEO or GMO. And they're telling you that because GEO means genetically engineered. And we're not sure what's happening with those genetically engineered. Okay, they're messing with it to the point that they're screwing it up. So its helpfulness, when it's unmessed with, probably beneficial. So when I buy soy, I try to look for two things: non-GMO and organic. Okay? Because I'm telling you, with those GEO products, they're not sure what's happening in the human body with that. Yeah. And Monsanto and DuPont are the biggest ones with this GMO stuff. Yeah. And they're screwing it up. They call it pharmacology. Okay, they're supposed to be developing foods that's supposed to help you fight against disease, and then they end up giving you more diseases than what you need to fight against.
Thank you. So certainly, unfortunately, I didn't have time to even address topics of organic and genetically modified organisms in this talk, but it certainly is an area of ongoing research. At this point, we just don't know. There's a lot of controversy around it, but if you do want to avoid genetically modified organisms, buying organic food is really the only way to do that in this country. Mm-hmm. Yes. My email address is karen.wagner@uphs.upenn. So karen.wagner@uphs for University of Pennsylvania Health System. uphs.upenn. UPENN, like upenn.edu.
So is most of the nutritional studies that are funded in America, are they funded by pharmaceutical companies, or are there actual groups like, well, for instance, Abramson Cancer Center or other facilities that are doing this outside of the profit margin, outside of developing these things for profit?
Absolutely. I don't know the particular breakdown, but I know that a lot of the funding for nutritional research actually does come from the NIH and government funded. It's mostly government funded research. Certainly, industry is getting into some research, not so much with cancer prevention, but sometimes with heart disease and other kind of disease effects. And that universities do some research, mostly in particular extracts from phytochemicals and their interactions in cell cultures and animal models. So I'm not sure the exact breakdown, but most of it is government funded. I think the microphone's coming around right here.
Can we go back to the soy question?
Sure.
And breast cancer? There's conflicting information from professionals about it. What's your thinking on it?
So absolutely, the soy and breast cancer issue is a huge sorry, I pressed that. So, huge issue of controversy. Again, there were years of observational data with populations that ate lots of soy, and those populations, typically Asian populations, tended to have a lower risk of breast cancer and a lower risk of invasive breast cancers when they did develop cancer. So people took that information and thought that soy would be particularly helpful for breast cancer. So people conducted studies and started looking a lot at in cell cultures and in animal studies where they would add lots of soy to diets, and people did this with people as well, although not as much as in cell cultures and in animal studies. And it seemed to show that when people or animals didn't eat soy throughout their lives and then all of a sudden ate a lot of soy protein powders, soy shakes, started eating tofu and edamame, this did not have the protective effect that it was hoped. In humans, there wasn't ever any kind of documented evidence that people developed breast cancer, but some women developed more fibrous breast tissue when they were on high soy diets. And in cell cultures and animal studies, there seemed to be some interactions that showed that the cells may be more likely to become cancerous if they have never been exposed to soy and then are exposed to a lot of soy. So then, this was about 5 years ago, and so then a lot of doctors really went back the other way and said, all right, no soy, especially if you have estrogen receptor positive tumors or progesterone receptor positive tumors. You should avoid soy no matter what, period, end of story. And then in the last 5 years, there's been kind of swinging the other way, where it still seems that populations that eat whole soy foods, even after they're diagnosed with breast cancer, it can be protective and it can be helpful. In the United States, it's shown to be safe. Eating whole soy foods in amounts of about 1 to 3 servings a day has been shown to be safe for breast cancer survivors, no matter what the hormone receptor of it is. It hasn't shown to be protective. It hasn't shown to have a particular effect at all. It's just shown to be relatively safe. Again, this is whole soy foods, not protein powders, not soy protein isolate, not supplements, just whole soy foods. In Asian populations, we still see this protective effect. Women in Japan and China and Korea are not told to stop eating soy when they get breast cancer. They continue to eat their regular diets, and from those countries we know that when women do continue to eat soy throughout their treatment and after their treatment, there does seem to be a little bit of a protective effect, and it may be helpful. Why this would be in certain populations and not others is definitely an area that is going on and on and on. Does that explain?
Or have a whole bunch of other questions like what?
Okay. I will also say that I do have to stop. The active constituent in soy is in the soy protein, so soy lecithin and soy sauce are not an issue. So, All right. Sorry. Thank you.